Will you pray with me? O God of hope, God of peace, God who comes and enters into our world as Emmanuel, God with us. We come to you on this Advent night and we are seeking, yearning, as always, to hear your still speaking voice speak a fresh word into our lives. And so we pray that the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts tonight would be pleasing to you, O God. And where we depart from your Spirit, may that quickly fall away. Amen. Well, this week in preparation for the sermon, I watched a number of news segments and documentaries about period poverty. I'll show you a few clips in just a bit. At the end of CBS's feature story on period poverty, a nonprofit founder, she said something I'll never forget. She said, rather offhand, "You know, we all wouldn't be here if it wasn't for someone with a period." It was like a light bulb went off for me. We all wouldn't be here if it wasn't for someone with a period, including Jesus, including Emmanuel, God with us. You know, friends, we have so sanitized the Christmas story. We've so run it through all of our filters of taboo and stigma. We've so deified Mary that sometimes I think we forget that Jesus' birth was messy, bloody, painful, stigmatizing, and only possible because someone who was so deeply human as to bleed once a month, she said yes. She gave her consent to that angel and was willing to carry in her womb for 9 months, in all the uncomfortable bodily ways that meant, this child God was sending into the world. We lose something, I think, when we strip away from this story the mess and the blood and the embodiedness of Mary's fertility and her pregnancy. The embodiedness that made it possible for Emmanuel, for God with us, to enter the world. I'd like to read you a poem. It's by a woman named Caitlin Shetler. And as context, let me say to you, she comes out of a fairly conservative evangelical church background. It's called Sometimes I Wonder, and it goes like this. Sometimes I wonder if Mary breastfed Jesus, if she cried out when he bit her, or if she sobbed when he would not latch. And sometimes I wonder if this is all too vulgar to ask in a church full of men without milk stains on their shirts or coconut oil on their breasts, preaching from pulpits off limits to the Mother of God. But then I think of feeding Jesus, birthing Jesus, the expulsion of blood, the smell of sweat, the salt of a mother's tears onto the soft head of the salt of the earth, feeling lonely and tired, hungry, annoyed, overwhelmed, loving. And I think if the vulgarity of birth is not honestly preached by men who carry power but not burden, who carry privilege but not labor, who carry authority but not submission, then it should not be preached at all. Because the real scandal of the birth of God lies in the cracked nipples of a 14-year-old and not in the sermons of ministers who say women are too delicate to lead. I know, right? There's a little bit of a vulgarity there that makes some of us squirm a little. I think that's what it's supposed to do. I first read that poem a couple years ago, and when I did, I had to reread it a few times because at first it was uncomfortable for me too. It made Mary's birth and her mothering experiences sound too human, too much like my own messy experiences of motherhood, the ones we don't talk about in polite society, like the discomfort of nursing. It sounded too, well, frankly, taboo to talk about in church or in relation to the Mother of God. That may have been the same thing that you felt when you first heard that we were going to focus on menstrual justice at church today. I don't want to talk about that, especially not in church. Lady business, that time of the month, Aunt Flo, your friend visiting, checking into the Red Roof Inn. You know, we have all sorts of names for it to avoid directly addressing it because menstruation does make us uncomfortable. It makes us squirm. That's supposed to be the hush hush, don't ask, don't tell kind of stuff, not the church appropriate stuff. Maybe it's the kind of stuff that women talk about amongst each other, but not in the company of men. But you know what? When I could get past the discomfort, I discovered in Shetler's poem a profound good news as I thought about Jesus' birth in such a bodily way. Because you see, when we so sanitize Jesus' birth story, when we so remove all the taboo, sometimes it sounds like Jesus entered some other world, not the messy, painful reality that we actually live in, right? And this week, Shetler's poem, it got me wondering in a new way about Mary. Like I started asking myself, I wonder when Mary menstruated for the first time. If she was truly 14 years old, like they say, she couldn't have been menstruating for very long before that angelic visitor appeared in her room. So I wonder, when did she get her first period? And had anyone told her what to expect? Or like so many menstruators, was she terrified by that gift of fertility suddenly staining her underwear one day? Did she think she was dying that first time, like some of us do? Or had someone told her that life, even divine life, could come from all that blood and pain and mess? And had anyone shown her what to do? Did she have the supplies she needed to soak up all that life-possible blood? Could her family afford such supplies? Or did she have to try to put something together makeshift, as so many do? Did she live in period poverty, as 1 in 3 menstruating Americans do? And had she told anyone about it? Or was it a secret the way it is for so many? Was talking about her period as taboo for her as it is in our own culture? Did she have to try to hide it? Did she have to miss school or work because of it? We know at the very least she had to stay away from the temple and some aspects of community life, because in her ancient culture, like so many cultures, even still today in many parts of the world, that menstrual blood, it made you unclean and unable to draw near God, or at least so the thinking went. Ironic, isn't it? Ironic that the very thing that made them bar her entrance to the temple, it also made it possible for God to enter the world through her. And how do you think she felt? When she got her first cycle, was she proud to cross that threshold into fertility? Or like so many menstruators, was she ashamed, hiding the stains of her womb? Perhaps she was scared to share it because it might signal to her father that she was ready to be given away in marriage. And, well, maybe she wasn't ready. So maybe she crept out in the dark of night to scrub her undergarments and hide the blood. And what was it like the first time she couldn't be a part of the community life or the religious life for a week? Did she feel excluded, cut off from God, from love? And what if, and I know this is a big what if, but what if she was trans? Did that first period send waves of massive body dysphoria over her as she had this bloody confrontation with her femininity? Or was it a welcome affirmation of her gender? All of this, friends, I know. It's vulgar. I understand if you're squirming listening to me talk about the Mother of God like this. But as poet Caitlin Shetler reminds us, if the vulgarity of birth and fertility, if it's not honestly preached, perhaps it should not be preached at all. Why is it, friends, and I know not as much in liberal circles, but why is it we can talk on and on and on about the blood of the cross, but not the blood of the birth, or the blood that was there even before the conception that made it possible for Jesus to form in Mary's womb? Much like our taboos around mental health, our taboos and our stigmas around talking about menstruation, they have led many people to suffer in silence, suffer in hiding. Many people to not feel like they can ask for the support that they need. So much so that many people have never even heard of period poverty. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I wonder how many of you had even heard of period poverty, or given much thought to the menstruator that can't afford the supplies they need each month and how that shapes and impacts their life. I'm going to show you some of the clips I saw this week, just a few of them. The first is part of an awareness campaign about period poverty in the UK. And the next one, or couple clips, are from that CBS feature story.
No, I never said anything. Yeah, I pulled part when we were on the ride. He was on the ride. Oh my gosh. I don't see two between them. We paid for the last time. Yeah, but you can pay for the second time. You can pay for the second time. I pay on the PC. We'll just sort it out. See the back. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, the buzz is coming, isn't it? All right. You've got a mark.
Mark?
No, like a mark. You know, on your I weren't looking her out. I just thought I'd tell you. Look here, just use this. Sorry. So, Sarah says you've not been in class for a bit.
I'm sorry, love. You know, I've been working doubles, but we had the meter need topping up and it's just a bit tight again this month, so... Chloe, I'm making do as well. We'll sort something next month. I promise.
Been away, have you?
Yeah, I've had stuff on.
Right, yeah, same. You'll be alright, yeah? My sister, she was like, you know, like the same. Anyway, don't worry about the jumper. Sure. Lovely. Yeah, get him on the jumper. No, it's not my jumper. It's your cousin's jumper.
In rural Nepal and other parts in the global south, it's believed that people who are menstruating, can't enter temples and will spoil food and cause vegetation to corrupt. And I think it's kind of easy to assume that there's this other, yeah, that happens over there. That couldn't happen over here. It's just untrue. You start to hear from students about how hard it is to be productive in school, whether they can't afford the products or don't have access to them when they need it. You hear from people who are incarcerated what it means to lack total agency and have to, beg and barter for these products. And you think that can't be this country, but it is.
I went into a shelter in 2005. It's a heartbreaking situation. If you have to pick and choose, do I buy food for my child or do I get my sanitary needs? That's kind of hard, and no one should have to experience that. It's demeaning. It makes you feel very sad. It's depressing. Depending on your neighborhood where you live, having to go into a store, for example, and ask for credit. The owner can tell you yes, or they can tell you no. If you can't even put a loaf of bread on the table, how do you expect for a person to buy a box of tampons that may be $5 and change? I've seen and I've heard mothers do all type of things just to get money to make ends meet, going out onto the streets with their babies, in and out of trucks. What's to say you're gonna come back? What's to say your child is gonna come back? Most mothers, they will put that food on that table. The average mother will put that food on the table for their children with the last $5 in their pocket, and she will find other ways to get the other necessities that she needs.
Just last week, we had a woman come in, and she was in tears, and she was wrapped in a blanket from the waist down. And she said, I came on my period and I've just soiled myself, and she was crying, she was embarrassed. Many times, what you have on is what you own. And she'd already, kind of made this skirt with this, old, it's the blankets they hand out to the homeless. So it's a rough, kind of uncomfortable blanket that she was using as a bottom. And I'm sure if she had not been able to come to us, she would have probably had to go to the bathroom and create something to staunch her flow until she could get the supplies she needed. We had a period of time here where the toilet paper kept being stolen. And generally speaking, it was women who were stealing the toilet paper because they were fashioning what they needed out of that, and just couldn't pay for it, right?
I mean, here's a little known fact about being poor in America. It costs a lot of money to be poor. When you can't do things like buy in bulk, or have to rely on check cashing places, or don't have a credit card, everything costs more. And menstrual products are not an exception. So there's not a hard and fast number for how much they cost. And you know, oftentimes people will show me a Google search and they'll say, well, I just looked at walmart.com, and you're wrong when you say it costs $10, because here's a box for 4. But again, that presupposes I have a mailing address, that presupposes I have a credit card, that presupposes I have the ability to purchase these items online at the day that you saw that price. And that's just so unfair. That's just so patently unfair that for those who can afford it least, it costs more. It costs more than it costs me.
Mama! I'll take this off. Sausage defense! Good girl. Drop it. Drop.
The concept of donating menstrual hygiene products isn't on folks' radar. So even those who donate aren't thinking that they should be donating these products. So summer 2015, after a year of exercising and eating healthy, I lost a significant amount of weight and needed new clothing. And I went online and I found an organization in DC that could use some bras, and I called them up and I said, is this true? Do you really need bras? What else do you need? Because I don't know what I don't know. And that's when he told me maxi pads and tampons. And that was the first time in my life that I'd ever thought what it must be like for a woman experiencing homelessness to also have her period month after month after month while living on the streets or in transitional homes.
A 2019 study surveying low-income women found that 2/3 could not afford the proper products and had to resort to using rags, cardboard, and paper towels. 21 U.S. states still tax menstrual products as non-essential luxury items. Thankfully, in 2017, Governor Rick Scott signed into law an end to that taxation of menstrual products here in Florida. And this year, in 2023, Governor DeSantis signed in a bill that allows public schools to offer menstrual supplies for free to students. But he also signed in a bill, same time, restricting educators from teaching children about menstruation before the age of 14, Mary's age. Even though we know that menstruators are getting their first periods earlier and earlier, and the average age is 12, meaning that many young menstruators like Mary here in Florida won't know what is happening to their bodies when they experience their first cycle or first become capable of carrying life in their womb. And here's the thing that Mary's story has me considering this week. If the vulgarity of menstruation did not keep God away, but actually was the very thing that made God's entrance into the world possible, why are we so scared to talk about it? And if we so revere Mary as the Mother of God, why would we ever hesitate to help a menstruating person like herself? Who knows? Maybe that's what's needed this Advent season, to bring a little more divine light into our world. When Mary first became pregnant, I imagine her community started to whisper. A young, pregnant, unwed mother, that's always got communities whispering. And historically, it has not been unusual for those young women to be sent away. It would appear that's what happens to Mary when we listen to her story. She gets sent off to her cousin Elizabeth, an old woman who is surprisingly pregnant. And Elizabeth lives out in the hill country, away from prying eyes. So she gives this young girl a place to hide, away from the gossip mill as her belly grows. But something mystical, almost magical, it happens when Mary arrives at Elizabeth's house. It's almost as if all the facades and all the secrets and all the shame and all the taboos and stigma, they just fall away when she walks in Elizabeth's door. Because when Elizabeth looks at her, she truly sees Mary. While the whole community might be calling Mary a whore or worse, Elizabeth calls her blessed. And immediately upon receiving that love and support, Mary finds she is full. She is full of this song of joy for what God is bringing into the world in her. Friends, that's what happens, isn't it? When God puts someone in our path who sees us, who recognizes what God is doing in us, it pulls that joy and that peace right out of us. I wonder what it would be like this holiday season for each of us to try to be Elizabeths to someone wherever we go. One of the women I encountered in the films I watched about period poverty is named Lynette Medley. She reminds me a bit of Elizabeth with the gift she gives to menstruators in her hometown of Philadelphia. It's just a couple minutes long. We're going to watch her story real quick.
Lynette Medley is the founder and CEO of No More Secrets, Mind, Body, Spirit, a comprehensive sexual health and awareness organization. Based in Philadelphia, Medley and her team started by delivering menstrual products door to door to underserved communities and have since established a groundbreaking menstrual hub. Tonight, Medley offers her brief but spectacular take on ending period poverty.
I remember this young person, and I call her Holly. She looked me right in the face and she said, "Miss Lynette, how do you expect me to respect and protect my body when 1 week out the month I have to resort to the most horrendous things just to get access to menstrual products? I will have to steal. I will have to have sex with people I didn't want to have sex with." And that's how I got into this space. Period poverty is the inability to access menstrual hygiene products. And most of the time when you think of poverty, you think of housing insecurity, food insecurity, and things like that. So when you think about those populations, half of those populations are actually in period poverty. In our communities, and I'm a Black woman, we do not talk about sexuality-related topics at all. When I first got my menstrual cycle or my period, I remember when I, told my mother about it, and it was just like, don't tell anyone else, and now you're a woman, so now you have to act different. I didn't even know what a period was when I got it because there was no conversation about it. I received a lot of resistance, and I still do, with the work that I do around sexuality-related topics. No More Secrets, Mind, Body, Spirit Incorporated basically started off as a comprehensive sexuality awareness organization. But then it fed right into bodily autonomy, which fed right into period poverty. I opened up the Menstrual Hub, the Spot Period, during the national pandemic. It has menstrual hygiene products, it has toiletries, it has Wi-Fi, it has computers, it has running water and operable toilets. It is a comprehensive approach to menstrual health and well-being so that people can live in dignity with their periods. A large part of the work that we do is community-oriented, so we are out in the communities all over Philadelphia and the surrounding areas dropping off these 5-month supplies of menstrual products. This is something that should be covered by Medicaid, Medicare, WIC, or SNAP benefits. Any school that gets free lunches should get free menstrual products. And we need to start looking at menstrual health as a system of care. We serve young people as young as 7 years old. It's disrespectful and basically demoralizing to have this young person have to engage in unsafe behaviors just to deal with something that they have no control over. My name is Lynette Medley. This is my brief but spectacular take on ending period poverty.
What a wonderful thing, out in the open, as it should be.
After worship today, you will all have a chance here in our conference room. It should only take about 15 minutes if we all jump in there and do it, to put together some period packs for our food pantry.